So my name is Mark. I came up here about 9 months ago, probably 4 or 5 months ago, linked up with Kurt. My life inside my house was always very, very good. My issues always stemmed socially. The majority of elementary school, I got bullied and I got teased a lot. I started drinking, I started smoking pot, things got out of control very quickly. But I did all that stuff to fit in. I started experimenting with other substances, and a lot of people experiment, and it spiraled out of control very quickly, to the point where if I sprained my ankle, I could go to the doctor and get drugs that you would give somebody dying from cancer, because those doctors were getting paid to give me those drugs. Eventually, the doctors stopped giving you those drugs, so now you need to find other means for the opiate. Very quickly, I got kicked out of college, found myself living at home. My brother, 2 years younger than me, was like my partner in crime. We did everything together, and he got just as bad as I did. In 2011, he hopped a flight to Florida. He'll have 7 years sober next month. Throughout his early sobriety, my baby sister got diagnosed with a very rare childhood cancer. 2 years later, in August 2013, when she lost her battle, I had somebody to call and say, I need help. If I don't get help now, Mom and Dad are gonna lose another kid. My sobriety date's September 3rd, 2013, and when I made it to my sober home out of detox that day, if you said, you know what, in 4 years, you're gonna pick up your 4-year medallion at a AA meeting in Weymouth, which I wouldn't even have known what Weymouth meant at that point, and you're going to have a child on the way any week, settled in with the love of your life, living outside of Boston? Boston? I would have told you were outside of your mind. We have this vision in our head that says alcoholics live under a bridge and they drink out of a brown paper bag and they're homeless and everybody in the world hates them, when truth be told, most of the time the alcoholics are the guys that wake up and they go to work every morning and they have a family. I went to a meeting in Hingham, and a little social butterfly. I'm introducing myself to everybody and talking about what, I'm trying to get involved in helping people. And this lady was like, you gotta call this guy Kurt Gerold in Hull. So I was like, okay. And on the phone, he was like, yeah, son, we got an open mic this week. And I was like, all right. And then, then I find out he's from New York, you know what I mean? And he's up here doing what he's doing, and we both have, a 6 and a 7-month-old son, and we're both fighting the same battle in recovery. So that's more of a God moment than any sunset's gonna be at this point in my life, so.
Plymouth County Outreach is a collaboration between the 27 police departments in Plymouth County, the DA's office, local hospitals, and community outreach workers. It's a collaboration between all these resources to come together to help people that have been the victim of overdoses, and to also to set up drop-in treatment centers. Hingham is one of the 27 towns that participates.
Overdose is the leading cause of death for all Americans under age 50, and more than 500,000 Americans have died since this crisis began. And so when we think about this complex notion of choice when it comes to addiction, absolutely people choose the first time they experiment with a substance. But again, nearly all of us make that willful choice. And yet for the minority of individuals who are at risk of having a substance use disorder, once that illness develops, they're not making a choice any longer to continue to have that disease and to be sick. We now understand addiction as this complex interplay between someone's biology, which is about 50% of the equation. So any one person's vulnerability for developing addiction is 40 to 60%. And then the other half of the equation is their environment or exposure or lifestyle. In the past, we've really tried to punish people into getting well. And yet if the illness is characterized by continuing to compulsively use drugs despite bad things happening to you, making more and more bad things happen to you often is not the solution to getting people well. And really treating this like any other chronic illness with compassion and science and helping people is a much more useful strategy to help them recover. Everything we know from science shows that people need years of treatment before they're truly in long-term remission and have a diminished risk of relapse. And so we've been blaming people for ongoing relapse and for sort of failing treatment, when in fact the entire system that we've designed is mismatched to what we know about the illness. So what is effective treatment? So for opioid use disorder in particular, really think of treatment in sort of three buckets. So the first is pharmacotherapy or medication treatment. The other bucket, the other sort of component of treatment, are psychosocial interventions or behavioral treatments. And then recovery supports is the other piece of the puzzle. So this traditionally people think of mutual help organizations like 12-step groups as a type of recovery support, but there are many others. Another example would be recovery coaches. We have 10 recovery coaches in our system, and they've been really game changers in the care that we've been able to deliver.
Many recovery coaches are in recovery themselves, and they can bring that experience to the table. As police officers, we always don't have the trust of people who have had an overdose. The recovery coach can really speak to what they've been through and make that connection and offer them help that they themselves have already gotten. Gerold has been an unbelievable resource for our department. He's one of these guys that always answers the phone on the first ring and never have to leave a voicemail. He really brings a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and he really enjoys helping people, and that's very, very important.
So what is a recovery coach is somebody who helps their recovery overcome obstacles or barriers that is blocking them from their pathway to recovery or walking through recovery. What that actually looks like is coming up with a plan with them, a wellness plan, and setting measurable achievements, goals to accomplish. The average day to my job, there's really no average day. I could be in a room with law enforcement agents, or I could be driving an individual to detox, or I could be visiting somebody at their house that just had an overdose, or visiting somebody in a rehab, or I could be honestly sitting down and breaking some bread, eating some food together with an individual, discussing about how their recovery is going. A lot of my time is spent on the phone, texting, phone calls, receiving phone calls, sending out, text messages, hey, how you doing, checking in, being that steady support in the individual's life, but also not wanting to cross the boundary of hounding. It's another recovery coach reaching out to me saying they have another individual that they need help, so seeing if I can reach out and help them. What do you think? All right. Yeah, I might have to take this. Tomorrow's pretty much like the day. If you're around, we could, get together, talk, and yeah, two would be great. We can sit down, we can talk, we can try to figure out a plan. Treatment-wise, I don't know what we could do, but I know I could. The only thing I really can do is sit down, come out with a plan with him, like what does he want to accomplish? Just really try to see what he wants to accomplish in life, if he wants to continue doing what he's doing, or if there's something we can work on. I'm an Americorps member right now, but we got put on to work with PAARI, which is Police Assisted Addiction Recovery Initiative. They've created this nationwide now, working with different law enforcement agencies. And one of the things that they're doing is placing recovery coaches in local police departments.
The overdose occurs, we're notified. It's a medical emergency, so police and fire units respond. Officers on scene determine that an overdose has occurred. There's a number of different ways that might occur. Someone might tell them, they might see drugs on scene, they might have to administer Narcan themselves. All the officers in the Hingham Police Department carry Narcan in their cruisers. You place it in someone's nostril, press it, and spray it up their nose. It has a very severe overdose. Sometimes they'll need several doses of Narcan to stop the overdose. If you think of the receptors on the brain as a stick, and at if they've consumed an opioid. The opioids are like a ball, and they're covering these sticks, and they're depressing the central nervous system to the point where the person becomes unconscious, they can't breathe. Narcan comes in and knocks those balls off. So it gives you time to get the person to a hospital to get treatment. Ideally, within 24 hours to 48 hours, an outreach worker with a police officer goes to the person's home, follows up with them.
We'll knock on the door. Sometimes like, nope, I don't need anything. Sometimes they're like, yes, I do, I need help, I need detox. So then I sit down and I make the phone calls. Sometimes they're like, nope, and then they call me a week later. Sometimes they're just like, they just want to talk. A lot of times might not want the help. They just, I just want to continue doing what I'm doing. Sometimes they don't feel worthy of the help, or they get in this rut, and I remember this feeling, well, like this is how I'm always going to be. What's the point in trying anymore? The initial meeting is very important, especially to try to do it within the 12 to 24-hour period. It's still fresh in the individual's mind if they've had an overdose. But for something happens, I don't know what happens after a little time period, where not that you forget, but kind of lose that gift of desperation.
There's a bit of a conflict going on right now. A lot of people feel that this is not a role that police belong in. And the people from the Department of Mental Health and the state feel that it doesn't belong. They should be doing more of it. There was a problem that was happening. Our office was responding to it. And the government really wasn't equipped for it. Governments are great, but nothing happens overnight. So until that gap is filled, we as police officers have been following up on this role, and I think we've formed a really good partnership with the hospitals and with the professional doctors that we're starting to make that transition. I had seen some emails that had gone out through a PAARI organization up on the North Shore, and they were offering grant positions. They were offering this chance to hire recovery coaches, and the positions are 20 hours a week, and it only costs the town of Hingham $2,000 for a year. So I said, sure, sign me up. Where do I get help for $2,000 that works 20 hours a week? And we went through the interview process, and we partnered up with Howell, Norwell, and Cohasset. And we interviewed different people, and one of the people that we had already sort of been working with on occasion was Gerold. He worked at a local church here and is involved in the ministry, and he's been working with some of the issues already. So we immediately sort of recruited him and said, we got a job for you. And then, he seemed really interested in it, and I told him, it's $562, and he goes, well, $562? And I go, yeah, it's 20 hours work. So I said, oh, that's great. And I had to go back and to apologize him too, because I said, Kurt, I didn't realize that's $562 a month.
My thing is, I will never give up on an individual. My level of interaction might change, but I will never give up on an individual, ever. Because there were people who never gave up on me. There were people who, still to this day, one of the people in my wedding party, he spoke to me, I'd say 15 years ago. Now, he wasn't always with me, but he was always a phone call away, and he never gave up on me. And that's what I and we as the anchor want to accomplish. So we're headed up now, going up to Nashville, New Hampshire, to see a recovery. Chris, when he called me the night of, I don't know, it was 2 months ago, a while ago, he says, he's like, yo, I need to get out of here. So usually I don't think much of, I just say, oh, well, we're gonna get you in where you can get in. But it's like, no, I need to get out of here. So initially we were thinking of a nice place we know down in Florida, because that's what he initially asked for, and you gotta try to do what they asked for. But then when I hooked him up with another guy that works with us at the Anchor, Mark, told us about this spot up here, which is amazing. I visited it, and I've been up here before. I wish I was in a place like this when I got sober.
So Kurt and I met almost 4 years ago now. It was back in September of 2014. He and I were both enrolled at Eastern Nazarene College in Quincy. And right from the very beginning of our first conversation, there was immediate identification, similarities in our experience, and specifically connected to alcohol and drug abuse. At the time, he had had some he had continuous sobriety, and I was struggling quite a bit with consistency in that. So it was refreshing. He understands how my mind works, you know, and how any little thing throughout the course of the day can send me in the wrong direction, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Plus, they really address all that stuff here, man. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, especially like, you know, the things I've shared with you about my brother and I, you know, what we went through. They really do a good job addressing all that stuff. And stuff came out, man, that I really wasn't. In fact, like this group that they're doing, the Saturday group, my therapist actually ran a Saturday group that we were to write a letter to a loved one that we lost.
The reason somebody would not
really
speak
didn't know,
about their substance use disorder is purely shame. A person that suffers with diabetes would not feel the shame, like, oh, I can't talk about this. No, they say, oh, this is what I'm struggling with. They go to a doctor, and then the doctor helps them out with what they need. But a person struggling with substance use disorder, because it comes with such a negative connotation, that they hold it inside, because they can't reach out to somebody, because then they're going to get viewed as a junkie, as a derelict, as a scumbag, as a criminal, right? As opposed to somebody who's suffering from a disease.
And I've faced a lot of judgment over the years. I'm 40 years old. I've, been battling alcoholism and addiction for 25 plus years. I mean, I use alcohol and drugs as a means to relieve myself of emotion and spiritual depravity, things like that. Circumstances outside of me that are not to my liking. And unfortunately, the people who are uneducated or have not experienced it either personally or within their immediate family and friends, it's almost impossible for them to really recognize that when I'm in the throes of alcoholism and addiction, it's not my intent to harm others or myself. I'm just looking for relief, and a way out. I've been locked up a number of times, done, short stints in various, county facilities as the direct result of drinking and drug addiction. And if I'm locked up for 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever the case may be, I get released from that facility in the same condition that I went in.
You never could arrest your way out of this problem. All the deaths is the reason why it's actually getting addressed now, because of the opioid epidemic. And now they're seeing it as a public health problem. If it's happening in your own community, all of a sudden it's your next door neighbor. It's part of your community, so you see these people, and you know these people. They're good people, but they just suffer from, they struggle with a problem.
When I was a young officer, I hate to say how many years ago it was, the first time I ever encountered somebody and arrested somebody with heroin. I thought I had just solved the world's crime spree. I was all psyched up. I was like, I just locked up this druggie. And I just referred to him on all these bad things, a druggie, an addict. With the training I've got now and the understanding of addiction and the complexities of it, I look back at that and sort of say, what an idiot I was. I'm sort of ashamed of myself in a way, because, I never thought about the troubles and what the family had gone through. So many times during interviewing people and talking to people about this, we forget about the damage. A lot of the victims of substance use disorder are the family members.
I came to know Kurt through my sponsor. She was supposed to speak at an open mic one night and was unable to, and asked me to fill in for her. So I went and I did my recovery story, and from there I started to build a relationship with Kurt. My boyfriend suffers from substance abuse disorder. I am in recovery. He was struggling with his. and my back was against the wall, wasn't sure what to do for him, and I reached out to Kurt, and Kurt was able to help get him into detox, was able to encourage him to go to further treatment, and now my boyfriend is in a halfway house and doing well. I talk to Kurt on pretty much a daily basis. I now help volunteer with the Anchor whenever I can.
The original vision was to work with people struggling with substance use disorder and give them a positive way to express themselves through the arts. We have our open mic nights once a month. We're working towards having meditative arts nights. And there's many things that go on in those events, right? So you have the building of community, which we think is vital. Honestly, the best brownies you'll ever taste in your life, they are usually gone before the event even starts. So first come, first serve. Yeah, you better get one now. We have a support network, right, which is community as well. We do a lot of outreach, obviously, which is how I actually got plugged in with PAARI, was because we were already creating those inroads with the local law enforcement. We'll do community dinners on Wednesday night. That's something the church has been doing, but we're looking towards actually bringing it to the people we're working with as well. The major thing we see is when you sit down with an individual and you break bread with them, you eat. I mean, that's when true fellowship or true relationship happens. There's some vulnerability, there's openness, we find that there's a great connection that happens over the table, over eating. We kind of push the boundaries a little bit, whereas a recovery coach is like, you kind of have a lot more boundaries. We view those boundaries as sometimes helpful, but sometimes they put up barriers to true relationship. Freedom is found in community. That is our motto, that's what we believe in, that community is the solution to this problem.
Then you finish that and you got this overwhelming feeling of, wow, I'm working on myself, and then they're like, now you got to help somebody else out, because that's the most important thing in all of life. You know, what we do with the 12 steps and what we do in the fellowship that helped give me my life back is really, it's just an outline of living, you know? And when it's all said and done, it says, help somebody else. And you're still shivering, shaking, ridden with anxiety and fear, and you're 4 months sober, and you go meet somebody that's got 4 days, and they say the magic words is, I want what you have. And that is absolutely the weirdest thing you could ever hear.
It's always great when you see a bunch of partners coming together from all different fields to help, and this is sort of, I mean, I give credit to Mike Botteri and Scott Allen, the chiefs of Pembroke and East Bridgewater, because this is sort of their brainchild, and they've really developed it, and not only to the extent that it's just becoming local, this program has actually been being looked at by other communities. They've talked about it at the federal level, they've talked about it in Washington, they've talked about it in Massachusetts. So the concept is really getting out there, and I think it's going to make a difference. I really do.
In terms of upcoming changes, I think we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. I think this Plymouth County Outreach program is really groundbreaking. I don't know of another program in the state or in New England that's like it. So I think we're really leading the way. But I think there's a lot more work to be done. Like anything, we need more funding. So I'd like to see more funding for coaches as well as drop-in centers, just making beds in substance abuse centers more widely available.
I feel like I've learned a lot more patience, tolerance, compassion, understanding that it doesn't have to be done my way, right? So my way was detox, rehab, 12 steps, go help somebody. Like, that was the only way to get sober in the past for me. And if you didn't do it, then you're doing it wrong and you're gonna fail. But working with people, understanding that we're all created uniquely. When I first got into recovery, I didn't know how to open up a bank account, find a doctor, get insurance, do any of that stuff. So the spectrum is very broad of what you do. It's really just overcoming any boundary or obstacle that's causing difficulty for the individual to enter into recovery and to walk through recovery. This guy came into the facility I was in, he was like, I'm here to tell you, you can have freedom. And that was a new message, because the message I was hearing was, oh, you're gonna be sick and suffering one day at a time, you know, just hold on, you know, that type of message. And this guy, he came in and said, you can have freedom. And there's like, I'd say 15 chairs in a circle, and there's only like 5 of us in the house. So I get up out of my chair to go get the guy, and I come back, and somebody's sitting in my seat. Now there's 10 other chairs in the circle that I could have sat in, but you know, this kid was sitting in my chair. So, you know, we got in a fight, whatever, yeah. And afterwards, the guy, Ed, his name is, the guy who was actually my first sponsor and mentor, he's like, you know what happened there, right? I'm like, yeah, he sat in my seat. And he's like, nah, you were scared. I'm like, what do you mean I was scared? I'm like, didn't you just see? I mean, obviously there was no fear in me. And he goes, no, you're not understanding. He's like, fear's controlling you right now. You were scared of being perceived as a punk, of allowing this person to sit in your seat, even though it's not your seat. It's all about image, and fear was, and that was like a light bulb went off my head, and realizing that fear controls. In that lifestyle, when I used to live it, only time somebody would answer the phone for me was if I had something they wanted, pretty much. But to be able to be there for somebody at all times who's only used to those type of relationships, those give and take relationships, to be able to be that constant presence of support it's completely new and foreign to them. And sometimes there's pushback, like, what do you want from me? And I say, I don't want anything. I just want to love you and help you, man, that's it. That's all. I didn't know what that was. To watch somebody go through the early phases of recovery is just, it's amazing. To see a person who couldn't even look you in your eyes a couple weeks ago, to feel like they are actually a human being is the greatest victory, I think. And the problem is not everyone gets there. With Chris, I mean, I've wanted to give up on him many times. I've wanted to, because it's been so hard. You know, get a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, where he's like on fire and loving it, and then going back to the same exact attitudes and behaviors. But I just never gave up on him. Something he said to me that, I mean, made all those hours and hours and hours and hours worthwhile was, he said, no one's loved me like you've loved me.
For anybody who's new or just coming back, give yourself a chance, because I can testify that the other side is much better. In recovery, I've gotten both my girls back. I get my 4-year medallion in next week. And my life is in a much better place. I don't have to worry about police knocking on my door or constantly watching over my shoulder. If people were to chase their recovery the way they chased getting high, they would be surprised at how good life could be. And it's not all easy, it's not all fun and games, but you learn how to laugh again, you learn how to smile, you learn how to be around people and be genuinely happy without having to put a substance into your body to make you feel like you're okay.